Hello, I hope you've had a splendid week. Have you ever noticed how some stories seem to stay with us, not because of what we see, but because how they make us feel? A quiet room, a flickering light, a haunting piece of music, or perhaps a pause before a character speaks. Sometimes it's the smallest details that create the greatest sense of atmosphere. But what is atmosphere in storytelling? How do writers, directors, actors and composers create worlds that draw us in and refuse to let us go? That's the question I'm posing in this week's episode of Pepp's Pods Beyond Stage and Screen. Hello and welcome to Pepp's Pods Beyond Stage and Screen. I'm Pepp and thank you for joining me for another episode. Whether you've been with me since episode 1 or you're just discovering the podcast for the very first time, it's great to have your company. Each week on Beyond Stage and Screen, I'm exploring the worlds of theatre, film, television and storytelling, asking what makes great performances, unforgettable characters and timeless stories continue to resonate with you, us, the audience. Later in today's episode, I'll be shining this week's spotlight on visionary film director David Lynch. We'll be taking a look at some of the latest news from across the world of stage and screen, and as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's discussion. But first, what is it that creates atmosphere in storytelling, and why can it sometimes leave such a lasting impression long after the final curtain falls or the credits begin to roll? What creates atmosphere in storytelling? It's one of those things we all recognise when it's there, but it can be surprisingly difficult to explain. You can walk out of a theatre, finish a film, switch off a television drama, and weeks later you may not remember every detail of the plot, but you remember how it felt. You remember a mood, a sense of unease, a feeling of excitement, or a sense of wonder. That's atmosphere. And I think it's one of the most underrated aspects of storytelling because atmosphere often works quietly. It's rarely announced. It's rarely explained. Instead, it surrounds the story. It shapes how we experience everything that's happening. And what's fascinating is that atmosphere isn't creating one thing by another. It's the result of many creative choices working together. The writing, the performance, the direction, the lighting, all coming together and creating this production, the magnificence, the atmosphere you all feel, that grumbling in your stomach, that gulping you have when a moment passes on stage. Take a moment to think about your favourite film or production. Often what stays with you isn't simply the story, is it? It's what it made you feel. The atmosphere, the mood, the emotional landscape, the feeling of being immersed in a particular place or a moment. So, for a moment, close your eyes and imagine while you're watching your favourite television programme, film or theatre show. I bet you can feel yourself being there right now, closing your eyes, and you can feel all the atmosphere once again. You can see the characters alive on stage or in the film, but you can also feel that atmosphere it created for you. Atmosphere has a remarkable ability to make storytelling memorable. It helps transport us somewhere else, sometimes somewhere comforting, sometimes somewhere upsetting, sometimes somewhere entirely unfamiliar. And perhaps that's why atmosphere can be so powerful, because it engages our emotions before our intellect. That's an interesting point, isn't it? We don't always analyse it, we simply experience it. And I think modern audiences sometimes place a lot of emphasis on the plot. We get hooked upon what's happening, who did what, how the story ended. And of course, those things do matter, but overall, when you think about it, when you feel about it, it's the storytelling and the feeling that comes together. A story can have a perfectly structured plot and still leave us cold, while another story might leave us unanswered questions, yet stay with us for years because of how it made us feel. Atmosphere plays a huge part in that. It's often the difference between watching a story and inhibiting it. And perhaps that's why some stories remain in our minds long after we've forgotten details. Because what we remember isn't always the plot, it's sometimes how we feel. Now, I hope that subject wasn't too mind-boggling and brought up some feelings of a certain film. But yes, atmosphere in storytelling is such a unique thing. I'm sure you'll agree. And it would be lovely to hear your thoughts about this week's discussion. If you've got a feeling you'd like to share about a particular film, television series or a production that you've seen and it stayed with you years after, then do let me know. It'd be lovely to hear from you. Email peps.pods@21@gmail.com. Staying with the idea of atmosphere, I want to spotlight a filmmaker this week whose work has become synonymous with feelings, atmosphere in all of his productions. David Lynch. Lynch was one of the most distinctive creative voices in modern cinema and television. Audience will know him from his projects such as Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks and The Elephant Man, many others as well. But what made David Lynch unique wasn't simply the stories he told, it was the worlds he created. His work often felt dreamlike, unsettling, mysterious, sometimes beautiful and distorting the real world. Sometimes deeply strange. And what's interesting is that Lynch rarely seemed concerned with explaining everything. Think of some of his films, even Twin Peaks, another example of unanswered questions. In fact, many of his stories left you feeling uneasy, unsettled, pondering what could happen next. But that was never really the point, was it? The point was the experience, the atmosphere, the feeling when you watched his productions. He understood that audiences don't always need every detail explained because they become emotionally invested. Sometimes a mood can be more powerful than an explanation. A piece of music, a silent gaze, a strange image. All of these things can leave a lasting impression. Lynch trusted you, the audience, to engage with stories emotionally rather than intellectually, to feel first and then analyse later without even realising you're actually analysing it. And that's one of the fascinating approaches to storytelling, because so much modern entertainment today is built around answers, around resolution, around purely making us smile or laugh or cry. But Lynch often embraced the ambiguity instead, not to confuse audiences, but to encourage them to experience something. And that's what makes his work so unique, because he sits there with uncertainty. He likes to imagine, and whether people loved his work or dislike it, or even found it baffling, he remains one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. Long after individual plots have faded, David Lynch reminded us that storytelling isn't always about providing the answers. Sometimes it is creating a feeling, a mood, an emotional space. And if that atmosphere is strong enough, we carry it with us long after that story has ended. Which brings us back to today's topic. What creates atmosphere in storytelling? Perhaps it's the combination of countless small creative decisions all working together. Or perhaps in the end, it's something even simpler. The ability to make you, we, the audience, feel something that can't quite put into words. And very few creators understood that better than David Lynch. So, looking at some stage news for you, Silence of the Lambs has released a trailer showing footage from the show. It's based on the 1988 novel and multiple films, which has sold over 15 million copies, the novel. Silence of the Lambs, one of the biggest, atmospheric films starring Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster. Now, the new stage production stars John Partridge as Lecter and Molly Granger, who makes her professional theatre debut. Also, Oliver Thornworth and Sam Jackson as Buffalo Bill. Now, the trailer itself, I won't spoil it for you, has got some incredible moments, which certainly I think will leave a sort of bit a twisted taste in your mouths, certainly creating an atmosphere in the theatre. So if you're a big fan of that genre and the film itself, I'm sure it'd be one for you. That's The Silence of the Lambs trailer, now available online. And that's all we've got time for this week's edition of Pepp's Pod Beyond Stage and Screen. Thank you for listening. Next week, our topic will be, why does live performance feel different? Until then, have a fabulous week. Take care. Bye-bye.